What's up everybody, welcome back. Time for another video. I've made quite a bit of progress on the Evo. Starting with ripping the old chassis leg out of the car. I've got all of the chassis legs and everything out, and we'll go over that shortly. But before we get there, I just sold my 2003 Hilux, and that means that I've got money to buy another car, which is going to be a street legal race car basically. I had a JDM top of the line one in NZ. I won't give away what it is. I'm going to show you some parts that are going to go on that car, so if you know what it's off, comment below. It'll be interesting to see if anyone knows what these parts are off. So in this container over here, I have a gauge cluster. Some of you might know what that's off, some of you may not. So we've got an 8400 RPM rev limit, and then we have a 270 kilometer speed gauge there. So let me know what you think that's out of. To go with that, I also have a master cylinder. It's out of another car. It's an upgrade for what this goes in. And I also have an AEM fuel pressure regulator for it. So as well as that, I have a couple of other little aftermarket parts that'll go with it. They are in storage at the moment. And I have some tine bonnet dampers that will go on the car too. But as far as that car goes, I've just sold my ute. Been hunting around for one of these cars for a while. I found a couple I like the look of, so I may pull the trigger on that in the next few weeks because I need a daily. I can use one of the vans from the farm, but I'd like to have my own daily. Right, so now onto the chassis rails from the Evo. So down here I've just laid out two chassis legs, this being the new one and that being the old one. So to start off with, you can see I dented it up when I was jimming it around trying to get it out. And in here you can see all of the rust. This is actually the better chassis leg, the other one's over there. We'll have a look at that soon. So yeah, basically all rusted through here. If we flip it over, as you can see, there's surface rust all through it. Now, apparently when Mitsubishi made the Evo, they didn't put an overly thick coating of paint inside these chassis legs, and that's why they rust. And not only that, I've found that, so the driver's side chassis leg in the Evo 8, I believe rusts a little bit quicker just because it's in close proximity to the exhaust. So not only have you got oxygen, moisture, you now have heat as well, so that speeds up the corrosion process. And looking at this chassis leg, it's pretty evident. So that there is the death trap I was working with. And as you can see down here, massive rust holes all through it. Flip her over, and all through there, completely rusted out also. So that is why we are replacing them. So that's the chassis legs, pretty rusty. Glad I'm taking them out because who wants to drive a car with that much rust in it? It's pretty sketchy if you ask me. Right, now the plan of attack from now is to get under the car and start painting stuff to protect it. So I've got a bit of sanding to do, a bit of paint work to do, and I think I'll just quickly talk through that and show you under the car and what it looks like now, and then we'll start working toward fixing the back of this car. So part of that process is obviously sanding and painting, and I've picked up a few more supplies today. Over here, move this stuff out of the way. So over here I just have a bunch of sanding discs and finishing discs. Unfortunately, they don't sell the sanding discs individually in any of the shops here, so I just got a few of those kits. I got some etch primer. So any bare steel I will etch prime, and I also have just bought a cheap little air angle die grinder. So these here go on the die grinder, I hook that up to the air compressor, and I can start sanding little areas under here, and also sanding some of the areas on the chassis rail that are going to be welded to the car. Now let's get underneath the car. Okay, so we are in the wheel well at the moment. Hopefully you can see that with the bright background. But as you remember, we drilled out all these spot welds all the way around the seam. And as you can see, I've cut the chassis leg through here. I did have to cut into this panel a little bit just because the new chassis rail laps up into there quite a bit. So I had to chop through just to get it out, which is fine because I can go inside the car here and I can weld up anything I need to make this good again. Now, moving further around. So as you can see, there is a bit of surface rust up in there. Now I don't think it's worth taking the rest of the chassis leg out to solve. So I'm going to get in there and sand as best as I can. I'm then going to put in a rust blaster or a neutralizer. I'll then hose that out, and then I've got some really thick rust coating paint that I'll put in there, and that should be enough to protect that from corrosion for a very long time. Right, so we're right underneath the car now, and as you can see, steel here is actually not too bad. This would have been hidden by the chassis rail, but there's a lot of surface rust under here. So the plan is, obviously, I need to sand all of this back, pretty much to bare metal. Then I'm going to etch prime it all with that etch primer I showed you before. Now, roughly where these spot welds are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an 1.5 inch circle around them. I'm then going to sand around it and then put weldable primer on it, because if I just use regular primer or leave the paint around those holes, when I weld through, the paint's going to start peeling back, and if that paint peels back between the two layers of steel, it's now exposed to the elements again. So any other areas like right here under the wheel well, I will sand all those back to bare metal and etch prime those and everything. So once I've done all that prep work and I've sanded and I've etch primed and I've weldable primed and everything, we'll be at a point where we can put the new chassis legs in, and then we can start welding things in. So to give you a bit of a look around the rest of the car, that is what we are working with. Not too bad. The passenger side is actually pretty good in comparison to the driver's side, and again I think that's just because of the exhaust just heating everything up. So there you have it. That is where we are at with the Evo. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get stuck in and start sanding and painting. One of the other things that I will do is when I come to put these chassis rails into the car, I'm going to mock them up and stick them in the car. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark where all of the spot welds on the steel are going to go. And then everywhere there's a spot weld, I'm going to do that same thing where I sand off an 1.5 inch area around the panel. So again, just to reiterate, the reason why you sand that circle around wherever you're going to be welding is so when you do the weld, you don't peel off all the paint. If I was just to weld through, for example, if I sand this back, put etch primer or some other primer on here, and I weld through this, the back side of here, that paint is all going to peel up and be exposed, and I can't cover that ever again because I won't be able to get to it once it's welded. So the plan is weldable primer on this side, weldable primer on this side, and then when I weld through, that paint's not going to peel off. So that's the plan. I'm going to get stuck in, and I will see you all in a little bit when we're up to the next phase. Alright, so as you can see, I am absolutely covered in crap right now, but I've made some progress under the car, so let's have a look, see what we've done. So on the side here, all I've done is I've taken all of this back to bare metal, cleaned it up with some wax and grease remover, and then I've etch primed it. So I've just protected it so that it won't rust while I'm at work and while I'm doing other stuff on the car. So that's this side. Right, so under here, as you can see, pretty much all this has weld through primer on it. I've gone through with the wire wheel and the die grinder, and I have sanded the majority of this back to bare metal, mainly where the spot welds are. So I've welded a strip through here and a strip through here, and then in the middle it's still kind of just normal paint. But yeah, that there should be good to go. So I've made it to here. Next I need to continue across and then obviously do the other side. But I'm pretty happy with this for progress, so there we go. And then I guess the plan from here is, so I haven't decided yet, but once I've done the chassis legs and got those back in, I might take the whole rear of the car back to bare metal. I'm not sure yet. I'm thinking maybe even I'll just take it back to bare metal in key areas where there's bits of surface rust and clean all that up. Not really sure. Let me know what you think. Should I take the whole thing back to bare metal? It's a lot of work, but at least then the whole thing's clean, it's all uniform. And then when I put the Gravitex on, which is the undersealer, then that texture should pretty much hide everything under there anyway. In terms of paint, all I'm using is an etch primer for areas that aren't welded, and for areas that are going to be welded, I'm using Cam Weld through primer. It's got high zinc in it, and it should do the trick. So besides that, other things that have happened, well, all the bolts that I have media blasted have started to rust. So all those bolts that are media blasted have started to rust, so I'm not going to do any more of that until I have my zinc plating kit. So I'm going to order the zinc plating kit tonight. I'm just not sure whether I'm going to make my own or if I'm just going to buy an off-the-shelf kit, because it's quite a cost difference, but can I be bothered? So we'll see. And you've also got to wait for all the parts, so it may not be worth building it myself. So because it's super humid here, everything that I've pretty much media blasted that was steel is starting to rust. So that's including all this stuff here for the rear brakes. My rebuild kit for the rear brakes has arrived, so I've got that to look forward to at some stage. I'm going to order a rebuild kit for the rear and the front calipers. So I haven't ordered the rebuild kit for those yet, purely just because I'm not sure whether or not I want to replace the pistons or not, or just the seals. If I just do the seals, I can just order that. If I want to get the pistons, then I've got to order them from England. I think it's the only place I can get them from. So therefore I should probably pop the pistons out of these and see if they're in good condition. That way if they are, I don't need to order them. But I don't want to get stuck into the calipers until I'm ready to get everything done. Otherwise it's just another thing that sits around in parts. So that's where I'm at there. So besides all of that, other things that are happening are I have ordered pretty much all of the rest of the bushings for the rear of the car. I've gone for white line stuff, so all the control arms will be white line bushes, and the diff hanger and moustache bars will be the energy suspension, and that kit actually came with the stuff to do the front as well, which I'll do at a later stage. At the moment we just want to get the rear of this thing done, and then we can focus on the front later. The idea is that I buy another car, that's my daily until this is fixed, and then once this is fixed I'll daily this, and then the other car comes off the road and then I rip that apart. Because it's going to be a track car, I'm planning on completely stripping the interior, pulling out all of the sound deadening, lightening it up, probably put in some kind of a bolt-in cage. I'm not going to go all out with a weld-in cage, at least not yet, and then do things like brake upgrade and bits and pieces. And then once I've done a bit of that stuff to that car, I'll jump back onto the Evo and pull the front end of this thing apart. So yeah, 2 cars back and forth. So there you have it. I think that's about it for this video. It's just a short one. If you do want to see time lapses of me sanding stuff and painting it, then let me know, but otherwise it's kind of boring. I can put music over, try and make it not so boring, but so I think that's it for this video. The next video might be me learning to weld. Part of this is obviously I need to learn how to plug weld. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to use the old chassis legs, set them up as if I was welding the car, and start welding, see what we come up with. So by using the old chassis legs, what that'll mean is I'm using the same gauge steel that I'll be using on the car. I'll even sand it all back, put the weld through primer, make it exactly the same scenario, so that when I do the welder settings and I learn to plug weld on it, it's pretty much identical, there's no difference. If you could imagine that I don't use the weld through primer and I use a different gauge steel, the settings would be completely different and I risk stuffing up the car. So that's the idea there. Let me know what you think, because like I said, I haven't done this before. So besides welding, there's obviously a lot of other work to do, including cleaning up the fuel tank, cleaning up the suspension. I've got to re-grease the CV axles, rebuild all the hubs, rebuild the brakes, so lots to do. It's just going to be finding time to do it now. But I'm up for a challenge, so if you are keen to see me take on this challenge, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.